extremely high.
Yeah. Extraordinarily high.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today to this Trump-Biden free zone, building a successful sales strategy event hosted by Oxbox Group Limited with our special guest, JV Consultancy Group. Firstly, could I ask you to put yourself on mute if you're not already? We recommend speaker view as the best way of viewing today. To let you also know, today's event is being recorded and will be available upon demand after we finish. I'm Richard Neal, one half of Oxbox Group, and I'll be facilitating proceedings this morning.
2 years ago, it was the same.
Oxbox are delighted to be involved today. For those who don't know us, Oxbox provide all the essential support services that your business needs around planning, operations, people, financial and growth. Our aim is to make your business become the success you want it to be by advising and guiding you through careful planning and operational support. We also source commercial funding for all businesses. Basically, for every business challenge, there's an Oxbox solution. Throughout this year, we've run several events with various partners on growth planning and are pleased to host this particular seminar with JV Consultancy Group Limited and to personally welcome and thank Jonathan Viney for contributing today. There are many aspects to building a successful sales strategy, and this seminar will look at the wider aspect of what is needed to recognise, build and execute a sales strategy, having completed effective business planning and having the correct operational structure in place to make it happen. We have two speakers, Hayley Parker, who is the other, some would say better half of the Oxbox Group, and Jonathan Viney from JV Consultancy Group. Let me briefly introduce them. Hayley has a wealth of experience in working with businesses of all sizes, both in the UK and internationally. Whilst working in the banking sector, she first worked as a senior operational manager, responsible for, among other things, business planning, change delivery, and operational implementation. She took those skills into her own consultancy business after leaving the bank, before forming Oxbox earlier this year to provide a wider platform of business advice, support, and financial assistance. Jonathan is vastly experienced in helping businesses of all sizes develop sales and marketing strategies, both in the UK and internationally. His strategic sales advice, guidance and support is regularly in demand. As well as being a board member with the Pied Piper charity, he's also the founder and director of JV Consultancy Group Limited, which, similar to Oxbox, started trading earlier in 2020. So to set the scene, there will be 3 presentations, each one followed by a short Q&A. Hayley will start on the importance of business planning and the growth journey. Jonathan will then present on the sales and marketing strategy before Hayley returns with business operations. These are all different yet key components in any business. So we will be having a Q&A after each segment. I would encourage you, please, to use the chat facility at the foot of the screen to ask any questions, which we can pick up and discuss before moving on to the next subject. After the Q&A on the business operations segment at the end, we'll take any further questions or observations across all of the presentations and aim to finish around 11:15. I would also encourage you, please, to provide feedback. Oxbox and JV Consultancy are more than happy to run future seminars if there's a desire to do so. Both Hayley and Jonathan are also both making themselves available at a future date later in November for individual clinics if there are matters or conversations that you wish to take forward privately. I'll provide more details on this at the end. We all know what we're going into from tomorrow, but for now though, have a sip of your coffee, get yourself comfortable, and I'll hand over to Hayley, who will start with the growth journey.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Richard. I think for me, building a successful sales strategy starts with having a really clear business strategy. And put simply, it means having a business plan, a map or a guide to follow your journey to growth. Yes, I know it's a cliche, but it is true. I don't know many people that don't do some form of planning. If you get married, you plan for it. When you're heading off on a road trip, you get a map or at least a sat nav to understand where it is that you're going to be going. Especially me, because I always get lost as soon as I come out of the village, as Richard will tell you. So why embark on a journey for growth without doing planning first? With this in mind, I'm going to spend the first part of today's session focused on developing a business growth plan, because it's needed in order to develop a really good sales strategy. Many of the businesses that we work with have one common objective, and that's growth. Their reasons may be different, but the bottom line is they want to increase sales and therefore profits. When we work with customers looking at their business plan, we focus on 3 key areas, and that's what I'm going to walk through. None of what I'm going to say will be new. Hopefully it will just act as a bit of a refresher, and it will help you think about things within your own business. So first of all, we really focus on, number 1, who are you and where do you want to be as a business? For this, it means having a really clear vision. This is what you're going to keep coming back to time and time again, and everything you do in your business should be supporting you to achieve it. And if it doesn't, you should be asking the question about why it is that you're doing it in the first place. Bringing this alive, we look at some real key areas. So we look at proposition. This is really about looking at the product or service that you're offering. And it may well have changed as a result of COVID, but irrespective of that, it's about looking at your offering and considering your opportunities. Growth doesn't necessarily mean doing more of the same thing. It may mean looking at how you diversify, how you do something differently. For example, we're working with a client at the moment who is part of the ventilator challenge. They'd never been involved in medical parts before, but as a result of their involvement in that work, it became clear that there's an opportunity to exploit the sector. It was a tough few months for them as they delivered that piece of work, but they delivered it successfully. They gained confidence in their ability to diversify, and they also built new relationships, all of which opened the door to looking at other markets. We're working with them to support their growth. And that leads us really nicely on to the importance of understanding the market. Here it's about knowing what your competitors are doing. How do they operate? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do your customers actually want or need? And what opportunities are there within the markets that you could deliver to? So it's really all about the market analysis. Once you understand the market, it's then being really clear about your targeting. So who are your target markets? Who are your target customers and geographies? And what are your routes to those markets, your channels, as well as being clear about what your core messages are. It may sound really simple, but one of the examples I use quite a lot is pubs. They've had to completely change the way they do things this year. They've moved to offering takeaway meals, online ordering and deliveries, all of which was diversification. And why? Because they've had to find new ways of being able to sell in order to survive. But actually the interesting thing is it's not something new. In other parts of the world and even in other parts of the UK, this is a given and it's something which they're doing. So almost you could raise the question of should it have been something that was being thought about before rather than being forced into doing something differently. And this is about looking and understand the importance of looking at the market and understanding it. A key decision for them will be what they continue to do when we get back to some form of normality, whenever that may be. Another key area to look at when you're looking at the targeting is about how do you deliver and increase your share of wallet to your existing customers. So they've already bought from you before, so what's stopping them from buying from you again or taking up a new product or service with you if that's part of your growth strategy? To bring this alive again, we've got a client who is looking at extending their customer service and extending the range of products and services which they offer. They have got a really big customer base already, but they're not cross-selling across their different services. So as well as looking at bringing in and supporting them with introducing the new part of their service, we're also looking at how do you get cross-sales across those different areas within your business already. Because you don't want just new customers, you want to be selling more to your existing customers. And I think the final point when we look at who you are as a business are values. And I think sometimes people look at these and think that they're really quite fluffy, but actually don't underestimate their importance. Whether you have your values written down or whether you don't, what they stand for is who you are as a business, what you represent. They're part of your story and they're part of your reputation. So there are kind of 4 key areas we focus on when we're looking at the business and who it is that you want to be as a business and what it is that you want to be offering. Next, we look at business goals, and we really focus here. And from a growth perspective and looking at how it is that you grow, there's really 3 options. It's build, buy, or partner. And it might be a combination of all of them, but you need to be really clear about which one it is that you're focusing on and in what order. Once that's really been determined, it's then about having very clear objectives. It's about breaking that vision down and breaking that goal down over the next 1, 3 to 5 years and understanding what you need to do to get there. So really this is your kind of short, medium and long-term objectives. But the important thing is it's about what you actually need to do and when you're going to do it. It's really important that things are also looked at from a financial perspective, an operations perspective, and a sales perspective. So often, operations is forgotten, or the financial implications of taking things forward are forgotten as well. Those of you that know me will know and will have heard me say a million times, don't waste your time developing a plan if you're not going to do anything with it. There's no point in it sitting on a desktop, in a cloud, or in a file. Don't be that client that has a really strong reason to be in business and clear personal ambition, but then loses sight of it because the day job takes over. The business can achieve those goals if you set clear objectives. And you remember why you're doing it in the first place, which comes back to what is it you want to be and why are you doing it? We know a business that has become so busy chasing and acquiring competitors that it's completely lost sight of its owner's vision and their personal ambition for a better work-life balance and spending more time with their family. The thrill or that desire to grow has become so big that actually there's nothing behind it that backs it up. So from an operational structure perspective, there's nothing there. So they've got great growth ambition, but the back office, the operational side of it hasn't been thought about at all. And what I see time and time again are businesses that secure those sales, but then they either lose existing customers because the quality of delivery drops down, or the customers which they have won are disappointed because they haven't backed it up all the way through the process. And I'm going to talk about operations in a bit more detail later. The third thing that we really focus on is the importance of telling your story. This is telling your story to your employees, your customers, your competitors, and your stakeholders. Why your business? Why your product? Why your service? This is where your marketing strategy comes in. So just to summarize, why is it important to have a business plan? Because it gives you a roadmap. It gives you something to aim for. It gives you a journey that you should be looking at and following. Yes, there will be twists and turns along the way. I think we'd be crazy to think that that won't happen. But by understanding your market, understanding your competitors, understanding your customer needs and having a really sharp offering and looking at your route to market, your channels, it will provide you with clarity. That will give you clarity on what your goals are, which will help you break your objectives down. And that's by delivering those objectives, that's how you'll succeed. All of that together supports you then to tell your story and develop the right sales and marketing strategy for success. JV is going to cover sales in more detail in a minute, but before we move into the sales strategy, I'm going to open up to questions and just feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Hayley. There's some interesting stuff in there in terms about how you take your business on the journey that you need to go on to fulfill what is required. I suppose one of the things that I would ask here, and a lot of people are thinking of, is that we talk about business plans, Hayley, but what are the top tips for writing a business plan? And I guess another factor is how long should it be?
So this is a really interesting one. I say short and sweet, keep it simple. If you overcomplicate it, you're not going to follow it. And if it's too long, people won't look at it, people won't read it. So short and sweet, but make it real and make your objectives count.
It's a daunting thought, isn't it, to write a business plan? So, and there's a lot of headings that we mentioned there. So a lot of these businesses won't necessarily have skills around operations, around sales, and particularly around financial as well. So, how do you address that as being a sole business owner?
I mean, I'm going to say this, aren't I? Because we've got a business that does it, but bring somebody in to help you. By bringing somebody in, whether you end up having a written document or not is almost irrelevant. I think what's important is you're getting perspective, and actually you're getting a sounding board and somebody that will work with you and look at things objectively. And that's what we do. So quite often we're working with clients and they haven't thought about the possibility of actually opening up to another market, or they may have done, but they've never had the confidence to actually do something about it. By having somebody there and supporting you to say, actually, you can do it, we just need to do this, this, and this. It brings it alive and it helps it become real.
And I think another one of the big things that I picked up out of that, and I've heard you say before, is the importance of the people in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be covering that in a bit more detail when we go into the ops part later. But it is really important. The people in your business are who are going to help you achieve your plan. And if you haven't got the right people in there and you haven't got the right skills and experience, it's almost the first thing that needs to be addressed.
And important to bring these people along with you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, they need to be part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, are there any more questions? There's nothing. We've got something on the chat here about what advice do you give to those clients who get overtaken by the day job, which is a very valid question. I think it's probably a lot of people would think that. How do you get them back on track? Is it regular review of performance against plan important? I guess the answer is yes, but do you want to enlarge on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I'm going to cover this quite a bit when we go into the next part of it, but you have to take that time out. So it's that horrible cliche, another one. I'm kind of full of cliches today, but that kind of spending too much time in the business rather than on the business. And I keep coming back to, I've been fortunate enough, or maybe not, to have worked for large corporates as well as working for smaller businesses. And the one thing that religiously happens in bigger companies and your big corporates are they have ordinarily a day a month for each department where they are focusing on their delivery. So they are able to understand what's going on, they make changes within those meetings and they take them forward. And I think that's one of the key differences I find between working with smaller businesses and larger businesses. It's finding that time to spend reviewing the business. We're the same, we have to do it and we make sure we religiously have it in our diary, but it's really hard work and it's part of it's a discipline thing. But I think it's also about bringing in perspective. It's about having somebody that you can talk to. And if you need your board meeting chaired, then get it chaired by somebody independent to enable it to actually be effective.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, we'll keep the questions coming because we will come back to this when we close up at the end. But for the moment, I'll thank you, Hayley. Have a rest, have a sip of coffee. And I'll introduce Jonathan Viney. Jonathan will be known to many of you, but Jonathan, extremely skilled and experienced, who's going to help guide us through the sales strategy, sales management, sales processes and tools. So with that, Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for that, Hayley, and good morning to everybody and to people I know. Hi, nice to see you again. Some names I don't recognise. So I will try to cover in about 20 minutes, which is a pretty short period of time when you think that at Vodafone, we'd put salespeople through a 12-week residential training program to cover everything about doing a sales job, let alone doing a sales strategy. So the bits that Hayley were talking about are really important in people setting your business plan, setting your goals, and reviewing those. And then the question I get asked, because that's the area I kind of specialise in, was how do I make the sales teams then achieve that? And that's sometimes where it starts to fall apart, because the plans don't consider the impact on sales. And the bit with sales, it's ever changing, and the world changes all the time. And I kind of encourage people to review it. And there's a number of facets that can change. One is your customers can change what they actually want. Their marketplaces change, what they do. And if you don't understand that and not talking to them, and you don't make those changes, you will miss out. The market and the competitors change. And one of my little stories, for those that are a little bit older, who remember little chefs in the days, well, in the mid-90s and late 80s, I would meet salespeople that worked for me up and down the country. And the only real place you could meet to sit down and have something to eat and drink was a little chef. And I can remember queuing to get the one just off Manchester the M6 to get in the car park, let alone to be waited to be shown to your seat, and then paying £6.95 for an Olympic breakfast, which was twice the price you had to pay to go down to the Greasy Spoon cafe. But little chefs are now dead, died 10, 15 years ago. When the ones that still open still serve Olympic breakfast and still identical. So what happened? The world changed around them. I know current situations are a little bit more intense, but their market disappeared. They were the market leaders in roadside cafes and food and meeting places. It can happen in other examples I'm sure you've seen, where people have been outfoxed and outmaneuvered, not deliberately, it's just the world's changed. So I can now go and sit in a McDonald's, have table service and have a 99p cup of tea. So all that Hayley has been talking about in terms of your plans, when it comes to the sales element, you kind of should be reviewing all times and making sure things happen. So what I kind of go through is then what I kind of call the sales factory. And the sales factory is because there's so many component parts in a sales environment. And if you compare it to a factory, which I think most people can kind of align them to, you have a goods inwards, and you have some things that happen in a factory that people who understand that mechanical element have gone and bought specific machines. They've trained those people, and they've got a design that at the end of each week, 100 white boxes turn out. So in sales, if you had a relevance where at the end of that first week of the production, you spent all this money putting this factory together, training the people up, getting your goods to come at a certain time, knowing how much you're spending for those each component parts, and you get 75 grey boxes and 10 that are triangle and they're not the same shape, and it's been delivered. What would you do as a factory owner or the operations manager of that factory? You'd stop it, going over the weekend and find out what's happened. Find that the settings on that one machine's gone, or find out the machine operator who was trained to do something actually hadn't been trained and was doing something totally differently. But how many times have you seen in sales people not hit their sales target or not do bits, and people just continue on with it? They assume, well, that's okay, and we'll live with that. But you don't typically live that with any other parts of the business. So with a factory, things can change in terms of blades, and tooling can go blunt and needs resharpening. Machines need to be oiled and greased. Computer programs need to be reset and redone. And sales is no different. So I just see so many times, and it may not appear to you, but most people set a salesperson up or a sales team up, pay them the money, and then leave them to do whatever they feel is right. What actually salespeople need to do is changing constantly, and each element of that sales process needs to be reviewed and tweaked, not necessarily in terms of point of view of overall restructuring, but every time you go into an engagement, every time you talk to a customer, there is a different environment, because that customer's got different circumstances and needs a different approach. So unless you're adapting that, your sales factory won't turn out 100 white boxes perfectly formed and perfectly colored at the end of each week. So how do you do that? How do you make it work? Well, you need a strategy that supports your business plan, or you need a sales plan, whatever you want to call it. And that sales plan only needs to be better than the next one that's close to you. So what I mean by that is, lots of people sometimes look at the whole marketplace, and Hayley's absolutely right, you should do your competitor analysis, but nobody's going to have everything that every single competitor's got, because there's no such company. Someone's got weaknesses and strengths. It's about And you don't win every single customer. There's no magic bullet for that. You just have to be better than the competition that's in that relevant sales environment or your relevant market. And the little story I'll tell you is about the two best friends, and some of you heard this before, that are swimming in the Australian Ocean, and they've been friends for decades, and they're chatting away and they're a great time, both successful business people. One guy turns to his best mate and says, Jesus, there's a man-eating shark over there. What are we going to do? And his best mate starts swimming. He said, but you can't outswim a shark. It's impossible. No, I've only got to outswim you. And we forget that. Sometimes we're so fixated on trying to do everything that we actually just don't do the important things. So let me share with you just one slide I have. So I've kind of looked at it from a point of view of all the elements of the sales cogs need to be working. If one of these cogs isn't absolutely kind of working as you've planned, the machine doesn't work. And ultimately, at the top end, you will not get the profit you desired. You may get the sales, but it won't necessarily mean the profit. So you need to have a situation where you look at your sales strategy. So one of the things that I see is people, when they look at that and they go, how do I now kind of review my marketplace? So maybe if you've got a pen and paper, if you just think about the letter A, and that stands for awareness. So think about, what awareness do you have in your marketplace? Are you well known? Are you not known at all? And that will determine whether you spend money on marketing, and then you can go into your marketing plan to how you actually deliver that. But all too often I see people who don't take account of what their actual current awareness is, and it may be very strong, but they're not capitalizing on it. And then you look at, okay, well, what's your C? And your C is your coverage. So how many salespeople do you have, or access to sell that? So do you need resellers or partners, or sell more salespeople or less salespeople? Are they in the right areas? And some fundamental things I see is people haven't actually assimilated those two things. And you can score these out of 10. You can just give it literally on the back of the proverbial fact packet. And it gives you a situation. So if you've got great awareness, but you haven't got the coverage, that may be why you're not getting the sales that you anticipated what you need. But if you haven't got great awareness and you've got great coverage, you also maybe have a situation you have to approach and tweak your marketing to be focused on what you want to achieve. So this bit kind of breaks into, do I play our money into marketing or people? And then you look at it from a point of view, well, how am I doing at the moment from a success point of view? So the next little letter you can write down is consideration. So this is the test to see if your products and services and solutions that you're selling are what the marketplace wants. We've all seen Dragon's Den, I'm sure, and there's people who've come up with some great ideas looking for a problem. You can convince yourself there's a problem, but actually someone going to purchase them from you. So if you take and look at your recent meetings and conversations that your sales staff have had, or you've had yourself, if you haven't got to the point where you've been considered by your potential new client or existing client about this new product you've got. So consideration would be, you've had a meeting and the person's turned around and said, actually, I quite like what you've got to offer here. And through the questioning you've done, I can see that, yes, we could be looking to purchase it. So if you're getting a success rate of 8 out of 10 meetings, you get the right indicators that your offering is right for the market. If you're having to do 10 meetings to get one person to actually take the opportunity where you can go through the quotation or commercial other parts of the element, you've got to really go back to where Hayley was and start to look at what's in the business. Are you doing the right things? Are you actually selling the right environment? The last bit of this is H. And because we can't answer back, I can't ask you the question, so I'll tell you the answer. This is your hit rate, your success, your conversion. And this is about really where the sales skills come in. And are your people actually have the right skills and techniques and strategy when they're in the opportunity to, I suppose the old fashioned phrase would be, to close the deal. So if you're sat there and again, take the last 10 clients or opportunities you had where you quoted, or last 100, depending on the volume. If you're getting in an average environment, a typical kind of sales environment, less than 33%, less than a third success, I would suggest you've got a problem with the sales people and their skills and how they're being and delivering it to the clients. Higher than that, you're typically doing quite well. So this is a quick rule of thumb. By going through A and C on the left, so your awareness and coverage, it will kind of steer you down the route of what you then do with your planning around sales and marketing from a people point of view. On the right, this is then what investment you need to make in how you're managing what you're doing with the salespeople. So in terms of that part of it, I will now just clear the screen. You then look at, okay, well, if we have got a strategy which we're starting to form up, which is, this is the marketplace we're going to, and this is how we're going to approach it from a marketing perspective, and we've got the right salespeople in place. You need to look at what process is needed to deliver a successful sales environment. And the sales process is no different from a factory. There is a process to get these 100 white boxes at the end of each week. Sales is not a magical environment. It's not a situation where, and again, forgive me, these are slightly ageist, where a young man in a sharp suit with white socks driving a Ford Capri has the gift of the gab and can convince everybody to buy everything that he or she wants to sell them. There is a situation where you work through a process, and the process will be relevant to your organization and relevant to your kind of salespeople, and you can't necessarily force someone to go down a specific prescribed, use the same words in a verbatim scenario, but there's a structure that people have to go through, and you have to be slightly dynamic. But typically you have a situation where your sales process starts with your P, and that's your prospecting. So if you don't have a prospecting strategy, you're going to not hit your sales target. And for the prospecting strategy, you need to understand what your metrics are. And these metrics become very important later in managing salespeople. So just write down your P, prospecting. What are you doing? Where are you going? How are you going? And then just review it. Is it successful? Great. What can we do to make it more successful? If it's not quite, but you need to know what that looks like. And that's a measure of either your marketing department or your sales department. When you're then talking to your potential clients, or potential opportunity, now whether that be with existing clients, and Haley made a really good point. I see so many people not kind of harvesting and getting the maximum out of the existing client base or the existing market, and they want to go into something new because it's shiny, it's bright. It's what I call the butterfly effect. Oh, something over there, I'll go over there and have a look. But when you're talking to people, you need to qualify there is absolutely a need and requirement for your products and services. Dragon's Den, especially I've got bored with it now, but in the old days was very good because they would really drill down to, great idea, but where's the problem? And actually is someone going to really change what they're currently purchasing to switch to something new? There's no end of great ideas and patents, but there's very few of them that actually become successful. And then the next part of your sales process you need to look at is R, and your R stands for your relationship. There's a phrase that people use, oh, people buy people. Well, to a certain degree, that is true. And if you're obnoxious and people find you offensive, then the likelihood of you selling even the best product in the world is minimal. However, the relationship isn't built around the niceties and the politeness. It's about, does that person believe in what you're saying? There's a phrase that I use to help people through is that you need to become a trusted advisor. You need to become a situation where that relationship is in an area where that person trusts what you're telling them or advising them or guiding them. It's not just they go and have lots of teas and coffees and they're really friendly and a bit kind of jokey. that's part of a relationship building element. You need to have a form of engagement, but think about those relationships. And this is good tests when people come back. So I've got this fantastic opportunity. Well, test the sales process. Well, how good is it? That's really good. I see them every week. Excellent. Do you know what is happening in the business? Do you know what's happening? No, I know they've got a great dog there called Max, and it's fantastic. That's nice to have, but it's not going to make the engagement and the sales process work. Next part of it is, and this is really important, it's can you identify their needs? Not what you're selling, but what is it going to solve? And Hayley has touched on this earlier in terms of what is your proposition. All too often I see a lot of people talking about what they are selling, but what the client wants to hear, the customer wants to hear is, what are you going to solve my problem? What does it do for me? And until you understand the dynamic of that, you won't understand the need. And if we go back to the ACCH, where you're looking at, you have lots of considerations, but you won't have a hit because you didn't actually understand the need. And then you didn't actually sell the appropriate elements to them. Next part is D. And this is start of a phrase, a decision-making unit. In any environment, there's a decision-making unit. People that either influence or are gathering information to make the decision. And then ultimately, there's normally one decision maker. And I'll use this in an environment where if someone's going to go and buy a car and they go with their partner, within that, the partner would have a different view typically to what the car needs to have. And if there's children involved and dogs or sports. So there's a compromise. And in a good partnership, that will be discussed and be worked through to get the compromise. But if you only talk to one person in that decision-making environment, you may believe that person wants a two-seater sports car that's going to go as fast as it can. Well, absolutely, the actual behind that in the decision-making environment, there are 3 children, a dog, and a surfboard. So there's a compromise that needs to be had. So it doesn't matter whether you're selling a transactional product or a solution. You need to understand who sits in that decision-making unit and what power and authority they have within that unit, and what are the dynamics behind that. And the next part of your sales process is your sales strategy. Each customer you talk to, and the bigger the deal, but the same principles apply, takes more detail. Understanding who your competitors are in that specific environment. And a competitor may be, the budget could be spent elsewhere. They could do a solution in a different way, or it's just there are 3 other suppliers that are very similar to you. So unless you're addressing your sales strategy to counter the competition, your chances of success diminish very, very quickly. And you just get into a situation where your salespeople, or you, if you're involved in it, get very frustrated because you're doing lots of this activity, you're getting lots of considerations, you're just not winning the deal at the end of it. And this is where the difference between making your profit to having lots of turnover and lots of costs, because you've got lots of work being done that's unnecessary. You've then got a situation where people forget, and this is where Hayley is touching on, you've got to implement this. I'm going to speed up a bit now because I've noticed the time. You need to implement this and implement it properly. Another phrase I'm sure you've all heard in the past, where I was sold the dream but delivered the nightmare. If the culture's not aligned and the salespeople haven't actually said through transparency what the customer's going to receive and when they're going to receive it, and this that cliche as well, Hayley, so it's this kind of under promise and over deliver. If someone says you're going to get something on Monday and it turns up on Tuesday, you've instantly started to ruin that whole relationship that you've spent all this time building up. And once you've implemented it, what a lot of people forget to do is then manage them, because they are a customer which you can sell lots of more products and services to. More importantly, as soon as you win a set of business, it's up for you to lose it. Your competitors will after it. So I think on time, I've reached my time limit. In terms of elements and people, I'll just take a minute just to really, once you've got your sales proposition and you know what you're doing and you know your marketplace, you then need to look at your salespeople. And just as a last thought, there are typically kind of two types of sales activity. One would be called transactional, which typically is around high volume, low value. And there's a different type of a salesperson who is more transactional in the conversation. It's more high volume, and some of the ratios will be higher. You have lots more people you need to talk to sell, because there's not much you differentiate, and a lot of the conversation, the people buying will drive around price. So you need to make sure you've got people that can manage that. You've then got a solution-based salesperson where you look at the sales element, the relationship becomes more important, and this aspect to become a trusted advisor. Then you just write a simple competency to what you want. And then when you're interviewing to get those right people, you just test to make sure they are what you want. And I've seen in the past people employing and paying lots of money, and in some instances up near £100,000 for a transactional salesperson who's really successful in their previous industry, really successful at selling, but actually the person had a solution that needed a consultative sell, and the two fell apart. The person didn't sell and became frustrated and left the business. The person who had employed them thought that the guy in this instance was an idiot and not very good. However, it wasn't the salesperson's fault. It was the owner of the business who should have understood what they were employing, what they actually needed to do. So on that note, I will conclude. I don't know if any questions have popped up, Richard, or anything we need to answer, but very happy to answer.
Funnily enough, JD, thank you for that. That was very enlightening. You've just literally in the last minute covered a lot of the points that came up on this. And I guess a lot of people were talking about the importance of the relationship between the sales manager and the salesperson. And the incentivization of a salesperson is really, really important, because a flat out, bonus is not necessarily, I guess, the assumption that's going to motivate the salesperson every time.
No, and most salespeople aren't motivated by money. They want the money, but that is not the motivation that drives them. So, love a little phrase, salespeople only do what you inspect, not what you expect. And that's by, so, and that goes to, and I've managed international sales teams and they were very highly paid. Unless you inspect what they're doing, they won't do it. It's a part of nature of the beast. However, they want you to inspect. So part of salespeople's mentality, and there's spectrums of this, so it's not, is they want to be told they're doing a good job. And that's part of the motivation, that's part of it. And I'm not finessing it very well, but the ultimate end bit is, so unless you're inspecting them, you can't then give that feedback and give the reports. However, even the highest paid salespeople, when they are going off the boil, and we all have highs and lows, to know that they've got to report back, and it's the questions you're asking around that sales process, it motivates them to improve their performance. And this is very much where you've got a link between the sports world of coaching and the business world. Why does let's choose Gloucester rugby team, why do they spend 5 days being coached and trained to play for 80 minutes on a Saturday, when we give salespeople very little coaching, very little training, and they go out 5 times that week with no practice to get it right? Rugby coaches will get people to make mistakes, to learn to do something specifically, to then deliver have a greater chance of being more successful on Saturday. So the salespeople are no different, but they need to be coached and motivated, because when they've hit their target, they will go fantastic. However, when a sportsman, let's take a high jumper, has jumped 1 meter 2, the next thing you want to do is jump 1 meter 3. But that's because they're being coached and driven to be more successful. And there's no difference in the sales mentality, but the ownership of that is the sales manager or the owner of the business to make sure that happens.
Yes, and I suppose that was going to lead me on to something else I was going to mention. We talked about the salespeople incentivizing of them, but what about the sales manager and their all-round capability? Because that's quite a wide playing field, isn't it?
It is, and that's So people quite often ask me, what's the difference between a good salesperson and a bad salesperson? It's the sales manager.
Yeah.
So the sales manager doesn't have to be a salesperson. So my sales career, I've been a salesperson for a couple of years. I was managing people at the age of 18 and employing them. So from a point of view of, I've had people that work for me that are normally a better salesperson than I will ever be. The manager, and it's no different again from a rugby team or any coaching environment, you don't have to be that expert. You just have to make sure you ask the right questions. So sales management, I would strongly recommend in any environment that you have weekly reviews with your salespeople that cover the key elements that you want to make sure are happening. Leaving it 4 weeks for a monthly review and doing it in a group session, which is a traditional sales meeting, which I have done and run, you've lost 4 weeks. And also you haven't had the opportunity to work on that individual, which is their motivation. And when they work and you motivate them, they become successful, the rewards in bonuses or commission or success come out the other end. Whereas lots of sales managers assume just by putting a bonus structure in place, sometimes it's not even achievable with a big number on it, that will motivate and keep people successful. Okay. I don't believe that's the answer.
Just a couple of quick questions before we move on, conscious of time. You know, we talk about salespeople and sometimes they're known for not doing details. So how do you get these salespeople to forecast more accurately?
So forecasting is a really good one. And we go back to one of the things that I've always asked people is to give a forecast that is 10% plus or minus 10%. That forecast can be less or more than their target. And the reason I say that is because if they can forecast accurately, I can then work out what they need to do to improve. Somebody who forecasts inaccurately, I can tell that they're not following the sales process. And then you can break down which part of it. So it's what I call a leading indicator for an individual's performance and where you as a manager need to work with that person to improve their performance. Yeah. And it's one that all too often people get the forecast, oh, it's the same as your target, fantastic, oh, you've missed it, oh dear. And then they go down a disciplinary route instead of actually understanding what the root cause is.
Yeah. There's a lot of there's some other interesting points coming through on the chat, but we need to move on now. Perhaps we'll have the chance at the end to be able to revisit some of those and keep those questions coming, because we'll be able to pick them up later or separately. We're not going to leave anything, no stone unturned. But for the minute, thank you, Jonathan. That's really informative and hopefully helpful to everyone on the call. I'd like to bring Hayley back to the stage, so to speak, again. Clearly, there's no point having a plan and a strategy if you're not aligned to delivering it. So Hayley will now talk to us about operating that business idea.
Thanks, Richard. I think a lot of what JV has covered is needed across the whole business. So I'm going to talk about things from a business operating model perspective, because we spent quite a bit of time talking about the importance of actually having a really clear strategy for the business. We've really focused on the sales side of it. I'm going to kind of take that step back and say, we need this, we absolutely need to have that clear strategy. We absolutely need the sales working, but it's not just the sales working properly that will make the business successful. So I'm just going to share my screen back to where I was. So I kind of ended up here, and then JV has really brought alive that sales part of things. I want to bring alive the objectives and operations part now. So I'm going to just show a slide which we use religiously with our clients, and anybody that kind of speaks to us, this would be the first thing that we pull out to kind of explain what our deep dive focus is once we're really clear on the business plan. So we call this the BOM, the business operating model, BOM for short. And as you can see, there's 6 components of the BOM. The very first part that we always look at is the organizational structure. And the reason we do that is once you're really clear about what your business growth strategy is going to be, and you're really clear about your sales plan, it's really important that you look at your business as a whole and you say, have I got the right people in? Have I got the right skills and experience in my business to enable this growth strategy to be delivered, 9 times out of 10, you may well have the right people, but they might be doing the wrong jobs. So the key thing here is almost to kind of put to one side who you've got in your business and sit down and say, what structure do I need to deliver across the business? So from a sales perspective, from an ops perspective, from a customer perspective, from a marketing perspective, it's kind of no stone should be left unturned. And what we often find is then when we're doing this piece of work, 9 times out of 10, everybody might be reporting into the owner of the business. So lo and behold, their time is firefighting queries, that kind of in the business rather than on the business again. Equally, what you find is that everybody's involved in everything. So there's no clarity in terms of who's actually responsible for things. And that makes it really difficult when you're managing people, if everybody's got a kind of, you know, their finger in the pie. So there needs to be awareness, but you need to really look at your structure and say, what do I need in the business in order to deliver? That will help you identify your gaps and understand if you need to bring in some different people or undertake some training with people that you've already got within the team. And then it's about actually taking that skills and experience that's needed and breaking it down into the roles that you need in your company and having really clear roles and responsibilities. That goes hand in hand then with monitoring and evaluation. So JV touched on it in terms of people will genuinely only do or show you what they're being asked to. So go back to school, you did your homework, or the majority of us did. We did our homework when it had to be handed in. If we could get away without doing it, that's what we would have done. And that mentality doesn't change. So what's really important under monitoring and evaluation is actually KPIs. So this goes right back to the objectives that I talked about at the start. So you need to have really clear KPIs for your business, and that will be to enable you to achieve your growth plan. So what are those objectives, and then putting those into reality for the KPIs that you're measuring your business against. But actually you need to have KPIs for your employees. And that's across the board. So if, again, you've got a growth strategy, you know what you've got to achieve from a sales perspective, every customer matters, every potential sale matters. So your internal ways of working have got to be set up in a way that supports growth and supports sales. So from a KPI perspective, we use something called balanced scorecard, which means that you're measuring whole performance across the company, but then down to individual level. There's no point in saying, I want to grow the business by 20%, then not being clear about how you're going to go about growing the business by 20%. Everyone in your business, their role in your company needs to be supporting that growth. And likewise, they need to be measured in a similar way to how you're measuring the business. So everybody's role, you know, ends up linking into the growth strategy, so they understand their part and what they play in that. Whether you're the cleaner, whether you're the sales director, it all needs to be really nicely aligned. So that's where your KPIs come in. Going almost, this is like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. It's these cogs, they kind of all need to be working. From a governance perspective, governance, you know, it sounds like quite a scary word, but actually at its very simplest level, this is about having board meetings, which I've already talked about, the importance of reviewing your performance. JV said from a sales perspective, you need to be doing it weekly. Completely agree. When I had a sales team, I had weekly meetings with them, but actually at least monthly, you need to be looking at the performance of your business. Waiting quarterly, 6 monthly, annually, it's too late. That's gone. You can't do anything about it. Having actual board meetings where you are looking at your business performance, how you're going about your achievements, and then making decisions for change at that time, kind of in the moment, is where you're going to see that growth. Likewise, from a governance perspective, I talked about in the org structure side of things, the importance of actually having really clear reporting lines. As a director of a company, as the owner of your business, you cannot possibly have everybody reporting to you. and achieve what you're setting out to achieve in terms of taking the business forward. You cannot be getting into the nitty-gritty of everything. And as you grow, you need to be taking more and more of a step back. To do that, that means having delegated responsibility. It means empowering team members and enabling them to make decisions without you. Now, that can be a bit scary, but you can put in place things like, what is your kind of decision-making process that you want to have? What are your delegated responsibilities? So that governance piece sounds as though, why do I need that in a smaller business? But it's probably as important, if not more important, in a smaller business than what it is in a larger business. So that's really important, the governance side of things. Policies and processes and tools and technology kind of go hand in hand. And this is where, for me, it's really important that your policies and your processes support it. So let's go back to, I'm going to use a client that I'm working with at the moment. So from a sales perspective, what's happening is their sales team are going out, they're driving sales, they may be getting kind of driving awareness, they may be getting the opportunity to put a bid in for something. They may not be responding to that bid quickly enough. And as a result of that, they lose that opportunity. They may win that client. So that's kind of issue one, which we're looking at. A second issue which they have is they win that client, but all of a sudden winning that one piece of business has in it made them so busy that actually they're not able to dot their I's and cross their T's from a quality perspective in the way that they were doing that before. So from a customer service perspective, they've lost a couple of really big existing clients, and now in the marketplace, so in terms of that, one of their huge values is about we always deliver quality. Reputationally now, well, they're not. They've lost clients because they've had quality issues. So those policies and processes within your business, the kind of really boring stuff, that needs to be working to support sales and to support retaining your customers. And you drive efficiency in your business through tools and technology. So particularly in smaller companies, lots of things are done manually. And that makes sense when you first start, when you're trying to keep your costs down. If you want to grow, you have got to automate in places. You have got to drive efficiencies. That time saving you can use to focus that person's time that they've saved there on something else. So it's all about driving efficiencies across your business and within your teams to support you to grow, to support you to deliver from a sales perspective, and also keep your customers retained. All of those components link to the culture. So there was quite a bit on the chat in terms of culture and the importance of having the right culture. The right culture is created by the way people work, how they're managed, how the business operates as a whole. And actually, this comes back to your values. If you're doing something completely different in your company to what you say you're doing, there's going to be cultural implications. In communicating to your employees and engaging your employees on this journey is as important as engaging your potential customers and your customers and communicating to them. I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to stop and open up to Q&A.
Yes, thanks, Hayley. It's really interesting, actually. There's 2 or 3 observations that come out of that. Joe's put the comment on there about that, bringing the people on the bus, and I know it's a phrase that we often use, but if you get all the people on the bus, the driver of the bus is obviously the business owner. Now, business owners quite often have too many people reporting into them and get totally consumed with the day job and have lots and lots of people running around asking them lots and lots of questions. What can they do as a first gambit, if you will, to actually sort of deal with that and become an effective driver, an effective conductor?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is delegate. Actually, it's really hard to delegate. Delegating can kind of feel that you're losing ownership. But if you've got good people around you and you are really clear about what their role is, you are really clear about how much you're willing to allow them to make decisions on their own. And as you build trust, that enables you to do it. I think a key thing for me is it's delegation, but it's also comes back to these board meetings, which I harp on about all the time. Reviewing your performance enables you to actually review things objectively across the business.
So looking at that business operation model as a whole, some people have seen it before, some people are seeing it for the first time, and there might be a perception around the size of business that needs to deal with this. Now, I know you have got examples here of, you know, where this is operated for big businesses and also for very small businesses as well, obviously on a slightly different scale. Do you want to enlarge on the fact that how this embraces all businesses of any size?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I guess just taking a little bit of a step back from that, one of the reasons OpsBox was created was almost to say, why can't smaller businesses benefit from what big businesses have? And actually, when you get underneath it, they have a really clear structure in place, and the way that they operate is really clear. So in a large corporate company, I think I talked about board meetings, you know, earlier on. I kind of don't want to talk about them anymore because I've mentioned them too many times. But actually, whether you're a big company or whether you're a small company that is looking to grow, all of these components are really important. We're working with very big companies, you know, 50 million pound turnover companies, but we're also working with really small companies and startups, and actually supporting them to get this in place from day one. And looking at, okay, you've got a really clear growth strategy that you want to get from here to here, which is quite a big percentage growth you want to achieve over the next couple of years. Actually set things up as you mean to go on then. Be clear about what that structure needs to look like today and what that structure needs to look like next year as well. So I think for me, it's absolutely relevant for bigger and smaller companies. The benefit of a smaller company is that you can get through some of this a lot quicker than you can when you're dealing with a bigger client.
Just one more. I know, you know, we come from a background where job specifications and job roles are sort of quite looked at quite a regular basis. But again, with the sort of smaller type businesses, is this something that is needed to be looked at more often? A job spec sort of signed off and then put away in a drawer?
Yeah, I mean, I think what often happens is a job spec is written when you're advertising for a role, and then you appoint somebody, and the job spec's almost, you know, it's non-existent from day one. So you might recruit because this is what you need, but actually this is what you're getting the person to do. So the job spec is really important, but actually whether you call it a job spec or whether you call it objectives, it is about being really clear about the individual's responsibilities within the company, because if you have that clear, it enables you to measure and actually have KPIs for each person within the company. And that's really important. You will not achieve your growth if you are not measuring performance, and that is from an individual perspective as well as through the company. And I think I said, as I was talking through this, my experience is roles and responsibilities don't tend to exist. Everybody's doing everything, which makes it all a little bit of a bugger's muddle.
Yes, putting it politely, yes. Of course. We've got just a few minutes to go, so I'll do the wrap up in a minute. We've just had an interesting question come through about motivating salespeople through the pandemic and aligning with the prospecting strategy. So shall I throw that open to JV and say, what's your take on that?
In terms of, I suppose this goes back to the core. It is about communication, and Hayley touched on this in terms of bringing people along a way. So transparency and I suppose also there's a number of things. Setting clear expectations that are realistic. Quite often people won't, especially business leaders, are almost a little bit scared about being open and honest about the current environment. So if you know and you prove that the sales numbers will come down because of the environment, then I'd be sharing that we're having to reforecast. Actually, we're dropping your target, but talking to the salespeople about what tools and techniques they need to use now to get into their clients to work with them, which is slightly different than it is before, but everyone's in the same boat. So it's not like it's an individual situation. So taking people through that process, and I'm sure most people are aware of the change curve. So any change means that you get a drop off in performance. By taking those people through and celebrating little wins that they may get, through that and encourage them. So letting that salesperson or people know that you're all on this journey together, and we're now adjusted and realign numbers and activity. Once you've got that established, monitoring and managing those people possibly more closely, but not micromanaging those people than you were before, but celebrating those small wins. And that small win doesn't have to be a sale. It could be a conversation. And it's that little things that will encourage people who feel unsure and uncertain about what's happening, assume that if they're not hitting their target, they will not have their job, be put under pressure by families and friends for that. So yeah, take it back to the basics: communication, resetting goals, and managing and measuring them.
Yeah, no, yeah, good advice.
I think, Richard, just kind of coming in there, and we took, I mentioned balanced scorecard, and lots of people might not know what that is, but that's the kind of framework and tool that we use when we're looking at measuring performance. And I think, JV, what you just said is really important, because you want people performing to support the business, full stop. And you want them to be achieving sales, but you don't want them to be only achieving sales. You want them to be supporting in other areas of the business. So if they're your best salesperson, but they are absolutely appalling in terms of their attitudes and behaviours with your other staff members, that's going to have a bigger impact on your business, because all of your other employees are not going to want to work for the company. And actually, they won't go that extra mile for you because they just want to get out of the door. So measuring performance using the balanced scorecard really supports with that, because it covers, it covers finances, it covers customer, it covers people, it covers risk. So I think for me, how you're measuring and the KPIs that you're using are really important to drive those right behaviours as well.
Okay, thanks, Hayley. Thanks, Jonathan. I think the message is that the right behaviours and a correct strategy and involving the people in the right way in your business is really, really important. And actually, this could be as straightforward or as complicated as you like it to be, but actually actions that can transform your business and take it to where you want it to be. Don't forget why you're in business in the first place, what you're trying to achieve. Let's try and get you and every business owner out there to that point by running their business in the correct way and following the correct strategies. I mentioned at the outset, and I know Joe's put a message in the chat about sales clinics that will happen. These are going to be on Wednesday, the 25th of November. They'll take the form of 15, 20-minute clinics with Hayley and Jonathan. I'll probably tag along too. Confirmation with how to book onto this will come in the follow-up communication. Please do take advantage of it and share it with anyone that you feel would benefit. It's a rare opportunity to speak to Hayley and Jonathan together, because we know how difficult it is to marry up time, and also to tap into their collective expertise. We'll still unfortunately be under restriction by then, so it's a great opportunity to allocate some time and get some valuable free advice. So finally, thank you to everyone for coming along today. Hope you found it informative and useful. We've had some positive outcomes in the chat, so that's really good, and we'll follow through with that. Thank you to Jonathan from JV Consultancy for joining us today and his contribution. And a huge thank you, of course, to Joe Bruce, sat in there in the corner of my screen anyway, for behind the scenes work in making this event happen today. Where would we be without her? Links to the event, a copy of some of the collateral, and the recording of it will be emailed to you along with details of these follow-up clinics, as I mentioned. So from me, it's goodbye for now. Have a good day and best wishes to you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.